Okay, we got the bot is recording. So if you are listening to this later on, thank you to CorrectBot who's recording for you. So let's give also if you have okay. If you have any questions or if anything comes up, feel free to raise your hand. Kind of towards the end, we'll have a little time for people to ask questions and give some feedback, whatever's unclear to them. If you're too shy to speak, you can also write it in the chat. You can put it in general chat and ping me or Anton. What's going on, Ragefly? So feel free to also, yeah, if you have any questions, anything's coming up, anything's unclear throughout the convo, feel free to drop it in there, and I'm gonna keep it going. So, all right, cool. I think we'll get started. And if Smart wants to join in, you could join in. So we got 3 folks up here who have been pretty busy in the compute channel, and I want to just give you guys a second to maybe introduce yourself, like what you've been working on, or what are some of your interests. And we could go around Ryan, Luke, and then Bowtied if you want. Overall, there's been a lot of progress in the compute, like running a node, providing compute, how that plugs in with the Morpheus token. There he is. And so this is one of the branches of Morpheus. There is the capital providing, then there's the compute providing, and then there's going to be the building in that aspect. So this call is about getting some people, some big brains up here who know about that compute side. So Ryan, if you could just kick us off with a little bit about yourself and like what you've been doing in the compute, and then I have a list of questions to get to as well.
Yeah, definitely. My name is Ryan Condron. I run a company called Titan. We actually specialize in mining tools and Bitcoin mining, but we founded a protocol called Lumerin several years ago for decentralized data routing. Essentially, you have a data provider, a data consumer, and they get connected through a smart contract engagement. This allows them to predefine the economics and make it trustless and decentralized. We started applying this pattern actually to Morpheus back in February, where we now have a Morpheus essentially series of contracts that define a model registry, a provider registry, an agent registry, a marketplace that ties all those bids together, and then a session routing system that allows a user to open and close sessions with the providers for the different models and agents. So I wrote this guidance document for this architecture back in January, February. And that's what we've been building out for the past 7 months now, or 6 months.
Very cool. And that it dropped a lot on us, and good thing this is recorded. We can go back and check what you've been building. And excited to see how this focus gets into Morpheus. Luke Stokes, if you want to speak a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Luke Stokes. For the last, 11 and a half years or so, I've been in this space, in the crypto space. I got a computer science background. Lately, I've just been kind of hanging out with my family and enjoying Puerto Rico, but I kind of got brought back into work life because of this amazing project. So some of my amazing friends are doing some really, really cool stuff in an area I think is critically important: decentralized, uncensored, AI that is self-sovereign, private, and secure. And so I'm just really excited to be a part of this. I'm kind of new to the compute team, a group of people, the Opensouce Contributors, not really a team, just a bunch of people. And I've been kind of relaying messages back and forth, basically, jumping from different chats, trying to get information out to the people who need it. So I'm trying to be here to support Ryan, or to support his team, learning what I can as quick as I can. And so, yeah, I'm kind of just in a support role in the chats and stuff. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to send them my way, and I can flow them hopefully to the people who actually have the answers and are doing the work. So really, really excited to be a part of what's going on here.
Nice. Thank you, Luke, for coming back in the game. Bowtied, would you like to speak a little bit? We didn't do a mic check, but sounds like
yeah, sure. So Bowtied Bluefin on here is my alias. My name is Kyle Cohen. I work as a cryptocurrency consultant generally, but been a contributor to Morpheus on a couple different avenues. Like Luke, I recently jumped into the compute side of it. I'm doing some testing documents, kind of proving out some of the user flows just to make sure it's easy for everyone to onboard. And we have all the documentation in place that people can get on there and get started, simply, easily, and kind of really help this compute protocol scale. So, Ryan is the big brain here. Me and Luke are kind of just behind the scenes trying to help out and make sure that everything runs smoothly, and that this really is a great solution for everyone.
Very nice. And thank the three of you just for being around and making yourself present for the call. It's been pretty fun to kind of have these calls every other week to bring different components of that Morpheus community up and speak about what's going on. So definitely thank you for putting some time aside. First thing I wanted to ask, and we can kind of flow who wants to answer it, and kind of the flow is up to you guys, or maybe y'all just add something in. Freewing, by the way, we're going to have some time for hand raising and coming up a little bit later on. So if you could just save your question or type it in. First, I put the announcement, a link to the announcement. They had a pretty cool video about what this node looks like and how it's running. This is in Phyla. This is Phyla, sorry. Phyla. And pretty cool video. If anyone hasn't seen that tweet, go ahead and check that out. So I want to ask the three of you up here, if we were to take a step back and give us a breakdown of Compute 101, what is Morpheus decentralized computing? What exactly is it doing? And, how are some of the mechanisms going to work? In that video, they show staking some amount, and they show choosing different models to do and stuff. Could maybe kick us off with what is computing?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So essentially, it's taking a user or someone that wants to run prompts through an LLM and connecting them with a provider, and then making sure that provider is properly compensated at a competitive market rate. So that's, at its very essence, it's making sure providers are compensated and users get access to the LLMs that they want access to. And here's the kicker with all of it, and this is why Morpheus is so important, is that both the user and the provider stay 100% anonymous through every step of the way. And that's a very it's a difficult thing to do, especially when you consider payments changing hands and transmitting of data back and forth, making sure that providers and users stay protected. And I'd say that's the core concept here.
And this idea is that a user is someone who, wants to ask some questions, wants to do something, perhaps do some, and the compute is a person running a computer, running a program in the background, offering up their computer power, basically.
Yeah. So the compute, not just running the computer power, but also hosting the model. See, that's the other aspect of it, is you'll have the GPU, but you'll have to host the actual LLM in order to process the prompt coming in.
Cool. And in this model, who is the audience actually? Who is the people as the compute is hosting the model, which I imagine is a certain amount of storage, certain amount of data, amount of their hard drive they got to set aside to just have the model, keep it safe, keep it running. Who are some of the audience perhaps that would want to use this? Who would be wanting to do these inquiries? In Phyla, they show some stuff there, they're researching about TEE. Who may be the audience, basically?
That is a very hard question, because the audience is going to take the form of the accessibility of the UI. So if we make the UI more accessible, more user-friendly, more engaging, you could literally have kids in the middle of Botswana learning English from it, right? If it's more techy, it's low level, it's hard to understand, then you're going to have researchers running complex GPU designs through it. The reality is AI is a very powerful tool for content creation, learning, education, discovery, and because of that, the Morpheus network really is going to be useful to everybody based on the sole limitation is how well do we present it in a UX.
That's a good distinction about how easy, and if anybody else wants to chime in there, feel free to, about how easy it is to use could open up or close opportunities of who is the potential person to be using it. And when we see really advanced DeFi stuff, sometimes it sounds really good, but it's so complex with different, things that perhaps someone in finance or marketing may know how to do, but just typing in a box. And that's what I really liked about that video, where they're just typing something in. It shows that there's like a real use case for ease of use.
Yeah, if I could jump in a little bit there, I've been working on usability for crypto for quite some time. And I just feel like chat is the universal interface. Everyone knows how to communicate just by words and language. And I'm really excited about that kind of making the entire ecosystem, not just AI and accessing complicated things like computational whatever, but also just crypto especially. That's one of the neat features about Morpheus, is that you can start interacting with cryptocurrency and learning about cryptocurrency as you're interacting with your own wallet. And I really like the idea, again, that you can do that in a private, secure way where you're not trusting some third party that may or may not be, scraping your wallet and stealing your funds. One question I had for Ryan related to accessibility and just kind of usability is there's been some questions in the support that I've been kind of hearing about kind of everyday people saying, oh, I've got an old laptop. Can I just start making some money by providing compute? I think that's a pretty common question in most networks where there's any form of like master node or any kind of thing you can run on your own computer. I think my perspective is it kind of relates to the early days of Bitcoin. We had the Bitcoin QT wallet, and most people don't remember those days, but you could actually, way back in the day, you could mine Bitcoin from a normal laptop just by running the normal wallet that everybody ran. It had a miner built into it. Obviously, those days were short, and eventually, the GPUs and then later the ASICs came in and kind of took over the whole thing. And then you had to, today, you have to be a massive multi-million-dollar organization to ever see a profit. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, Ryan. I know we've kind of had different perspectives I've heard within the ecosystem about, anyone can do it. It could be as long as you're providing a very simple model, for example, that you can run effectively on your own computer. Well, then sure, you could be a provider of that very simple model. But if you're going to provide a complex model, you're going to provide a lot of data throughput, for example, then you're going to have, need to have a server farm and things of that nature. So as I've been talking to different people who are working on the testnet, I'm hearing different opinions about, how accessible should this be? And that also related to that question, how much of this is really a B2B play where there's businesses providing services to other businesses? You might think of like Venice, for example. They need compute to provide their end customer. So they're kind of a customer of compute, but they're also a business. Thoughts there as well, as far as, are people going to be accessing the interface directly? Or are they going to be going through a provider like Venice? What are your thoughts on that?
Great question.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let me start with the first question, which was, I have an old laptop. Can I make money using it? Short answer, yes, you could make money. The more appropriate answer is you probably wouldn't make very much money. And the reason is the idea of a compute provider is you're providing compute that the user does not have locally, right? So if I'm running a smartphone with a future Morpheus node on it, and I have a refined LLM locally on my phone, there's very little reason why I would need to connect to your remote laptop to do the compute. Whereas, I could connect to someone at a data center that's running A100 or something maybe even less than that could provide better performance for cheaper. So competition-wise and reputation-wise, I don't think it's going to be every bit of GPU power, every bit of CPU power out there that's not being utilized is going to lend to the the Morpheus user provider user ecosystem. I could be wrong, but I don't necessarily see the potential need for that, because we do have these pretty powerful devices in our pockets. Our local laptops, our local computers are actually pretty powerful, so they could run a lot of the simple stuff locally. Now, when it comes to video rendering, when it comes to audio rendering, image generation, that is going to require a bit more processing power. And if I connect to someone's remote laptop, it's going to take me a lot longer than if I connect to a specialized piece of hardware that's going to turn it back to me in a second or two. So most likely we're going to see a specialization here where it's actually high-end GPU providers are going to be providing these diffusion models and image and video generation models. So we'll see better performance. Those providers will naturally get a better reputation and win more bids in the marketplace. Now, I got so caught up in your first question. What was the second question, Luke?
That was a great answer. The second question relates to kind of the B2B versus B2C model as far as how you see this playing out and how many,
that's right.
consumers and customers will be like full businesses.
Such a great question. Okay, so human nature is very consistent. It's funny, you and I have had talks about stuff like this, more like meta type talks, and I feel like a lot of what we do in this world, especially technology wise, comes back to these same principles, and humans will follow the same patterns over and over and over, right? Once upon a time, we used to run Ethereum nodes on our local machines. We used to run, as Luke said, Bitcoin nodes on our local machines. And whenever we wanted to query transactions, whenever we wanted to generate wallets, whenever we wanted to, push raw data, we would simply have a local version of the node that synced with the network on our machine, right? And we'd go through the RPC connections. Now, we started seeing crop up in 2014. We started seeing third-party services for providing APIs that were wrapped around these nodes. And me and all my developer buddies looked at these and thought, well, this is really stupid. Who would ever use a service like that? Like that's silly. You could simply just go to GitHub, download, compile the node, and run it locally. Why would I ever need a third-party service to wrap around it? Well, fast forward 10 years, and now you have things like Infura and Anchor and Bitdaemon and a bunch of other services that have made businesses around being wrappers on top of a wrapper on top of a node. And they're quite successful because as the technology advances, it gets harder and harder to interface with. And I see that being the same principle for Morpheus, is as the core node of Morpheus advances and it keeps getting added onto and iterated on, there will be a point where it is easier to interact with Morpheus through a third-party service. Now that's the long answer. The short answer is people like Venice a lot more than downloading a local client. People like going to a website rather than downloading an app. That's just going to be most likely the trend. So you'll probably go to an app store. You'll see most people will not download a Venice app, or sorry, a Morpheus app in the app store. They'll download a Venice app, and then they will treat that like ChatGPT. They will download, make my picture, pretty for Instagram app, right? And that's actually going to be using Morpheus behind the scene. They're going to download, instant movie whenever you want app, where you can type in what kind of movie you want to watch, and it uses Morpheus behind the scene to write the script, build the audio track, render the video, and stream it back to your phone in real time. But it will use Morpheus behind the scene. So most likely in the not so near future, well, not so far future, so fairly near, we will be having third-party apps that have way better UX, obfuscating all the crypto layers. And you won't even realize that you have a Morpheus agent jumping around to 10 different LLMs, everyone being compensated and streaming it all back in one coherent content stream back to your device.
I love that answer. Just quick little follow-up is it highlights what you said about reputation. Like this whole idea that these nodes are going to be providing an on-chain, even with the hide and seek paper, like there's eventually going to be proof that they're providing the model that they claim they're providing. They're going to get scored on it. All that stuff kind of highlights again how these are going to have to be high performance providers. And that is something that has come up in the chat a few times where people are kind of just playing around with it, which is great. And I highly encourage everyone to do that. but also to set their expectations appropriately. Meaning, if you're going to be providing compute for someone who's running a business, you better believe they're going to be going for high reputation providers. So their business, if you download an app and it doesn't work, you're like, forget it, you delete the app, right? So these backend providers of decentralized compute are going to have a great service reputation so that these businesses can rely on them.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you, Ryan and Luke. Bowtied, you have something to say? Your mic was off. Okay. I think it actually opens up an interesting combo that came up too. Well, if we see that in the beginning, you had the opportunity to also create a business around that. Like you could have done that, providing that service. And so for anybody who's interested in providing compute now, while it is still possible, perhaps on a laptop or a high performing computer that's hanging around, if that same trend happens, which most likely it will, then it's also an opportunity to say, hey, if you think that's going to happen, you could also form a business around this. Like you can test it out now in this small scale, and if you have, you think that that's what's going to roll out, upgrade, basically scale up what your operation is, and could potentially become a business. So there is that opportunity for everybody. And this actually gets to this idea that GV brought up about permissionless, and it's been discussed in other protocols too, where there's permissionless means anybody can try it, anybody can do it. Decentralized means no one person controls it. Now, in what Ryan described, like we would say it's gotten more centralized in the sense that less people are doing it, but that doesn't mean it's not permissionless. Like we could try to mine some Bitcoin, we just we're not competitive enough. So there's like a little distinction about things being permissionless and anybody could participate, but it's just that the rate of success is much smaller. So is the compute for Morpheus going to be permissionless?
So that's a great distinction between decentralized and permissionless. It's akin to a cell phone provider saying you have unlimited data, but we're throttling your data to 3G speeds or 2G speeds. Oh, it's unlimited, but it goes at dial-up. So basically, you don't have any data. Which that's akin to trying to mine on the Bitcoin network without specialized hardware these days. It's like, anyone can mine it, but you're not actually going to mine it. So with Morpheus compute, I apologize, I get myself on these side tangents. I forget the core question.
Is it going to be permissionless? Like, will you have to sign a sheet to become a compute provider, or can you just sign up and just start rocking and rolling?
So the permissionless aspect will be all around staking. So your funds, your earnable, your revenue potential as a provider is directly linked to your stake in the system. So I can't remember the ratio right now, but there is a ratio. Basically, if I stake 100 more token as a provider, then I can earn like 1,000 more per year as a provider, essentially. So if I want to increase my revenue potential as a provider, I have to stake more into the contract. Now that doesn't actually cost me anything. It's holding the token. So if I ever want to remove my stake, unregister as a provider, I can do so. But there is kind of like a put your money where your mouth is, put your money where your reputation is type mechanic there. So anyone can be a provider. It's just a matter of what's your revenue, your max revenue going to be, and that's all about skin in the game.
Could you also comment on the whitelist quote comment that was in the original documents? Is that still for the early stage going to be part of the original design?
Yeah. So the whitelist concept was around protecting the ecosystem from getting like spammed with registrants from the start. So one of the worst things you could have for a brand new ecosystem is a terrible first experience as a user. So if we had users downloading the Morpheus node, trying to connect to the latest and greatest Llama 3 model, and then they had to cycle through 200 providers, and staked 200 different times, opened up 200 different sessions to try to find a real provider. That's just not going to be a good experience. So we wanted to implement a whitelist to start where we had known good providers that could get a head start with good reputation. And then when we open up the registration to basically anybody, it will basically allow those well-known providers to have kind of a lead on the reputation. So that was the original vision. That might be shifting a little bit because as of this new staking revenue mechanic, we're also including that actual stake for max revenue as part of the reputation score. So there is an aspect to, well, this provider has staked a large amount of more to be a good provider. Therefore, that's going to weigh into their reputation. Since they do have skin in the game, their interests are aligned with the network. This will either shorten or completely eliminate the whitelist period. Haven't quite decided yet.
That's pretty fascinating. I do commend everybody who's been with the focus of the more token and how to like really build utility into it as all these different components are happening. Utility for the capital providers. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about staking for the code providers, and hearing even this, like as you're gonna provide compute, centering it around the token actually being useful in a direct way as opposed to just speculating on its price, and it builds a more stronger system, no pun intended. So I think that's pretty cool, and it is cool to hear that in time it could be permissionless and perhaps there is some amount. It's like put skin in the game, and that's more of the weight as opposed to we need to verify you and do a background check. And we see protocols that do that. It doesn't make it as robust in the future. Quickly on that topic, GV asked if unstaking, like let's say you want to turn off the computer, you've been providing for a while, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go on vacation for a month. I don't want to have to look at my computer remotely. I want to turn off my provider and unstake. Is there so far a mechanism about that or a time thing? And then I want to get into a little bit of the test net, what's been going on in the test net and things you guys have been discovering there.
Yeah. Well, real fast, back to the permissionless thing is our goal with this ecosystem is that it's not dependent on any person or human interaction to keep it alive, right? So a whitelist is just not sustainable. So if we can avoid a whitelist altogether on launch, then that's the best model, and that's what we're working towards. As far as unstaking, taking a provider offline, you can remove your stake at any point. All right, you can unwind your position and stop being a provider. That's not actually encouraged in our current design, and the reason for that, it's like saying, oh, I'm a host for somebody's website. Well, I'm going to take a vacation, so I'm going to turn off the server. You're expected to provide 99.99% uptime. You're expected to be an actual host for this data, for this LLM, and that's what builds a good reputation. And that's a hard thing. It's going to be it's not a hobbyist type passive income thing. This is going to be an actual business that's going to be providing real compute as a real LLM host in a truly anonymous, decentralized way. So we want quality there. The last thing we want is to build a system that is an inferior experience to OpenAI and the other central pieces. And in order to achieve a even at par experience, we need to have very professional providers.
Yeah, I was going to add a little bit to that as well, related to kind of the whole tokenomics and that engine that basically provides both the incentive for the providers and the consumers to participate. A lot of people, for example, they're like, oh, I love blockchain, I just don't like cryptocurrency. Whenever I hear that, it's like, well, then you don't understand it, because the reward of the cryptocurrency for the people securing the network, the operators of the nodes, is what actually gives the blockchain any value at all. And I think a similar like economic dynamic is being designed at every level for Morpheus. That is, some of it is still kind of being discussed. Obviously, it's not mainnet live, but there's some really exciting parallels between what has worked very well for Bitcoin from a tokenomics incentive perspective for providers and consumers of the protocol and what is being designed for Morpheus. And it's just, I just can't wait for all this stuff to be out there so we can all be participating with it. But I just want to highlight that this is still testnet. This is still being, developed and designed. The core principles, I think, are solid and aren't changing, but there are aspects, just little tweaks here and there. And I'll give as an example, the staking of your Morpheus rewards. The code contributors are now staking their rewards. The capital contributors are now staking their rewards. And that has removed all the short-term speculators who don't care about Morpheus. They just want to earn on their Ethereum. And you've noticed that like the price support is for the token has changed. Like a lot of very cool things are happening because of that little tweak in the tokenomics model to provide that decentralized incentive for everyone to participate. So I'm very excited for how those type of things are going to be implemented across the different buckets, including compute providers. Because the compute providers that are serious, like Ryan's talking about, who are going to be putting millions of dollars potentially into whole server farms to support this ecosystem, obviously they need a return on their investment. Just like an ASIC, miner might need 18 months or something to get break even and start making money. Sure, there might be a risk involved, but ultimately we have to obviously make sure they're highly rewarded. So a lot of that stuff is being figured out as well. So it's pretty exciting. But I wanted to say that because as it comes to the support questions I see, keep in mind, everybody, this is testnet. We're still designing things. Again, the core principles, as stated in the papers that have been published, are there. But there's some really important tweaks that I'm excited about. So just keep that in mind.
Luke, on that note, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the testnet, and then GV got another good question. And we're about a half an hour, so we'll try to keep it around 45 minutes. If you guys want to raise your hand in maybe another 10 minutes. But Luke, how has the testnet been going? So it's been going on for a while. As you said, a lot of like new ideas are coming in that could work out. Some things have been working out. You've been getting feedback. What's it been like in the testnet world? What are some things perhaps you've learned or some things that have been fixed? Even the discussion earlier about whitelists that has now been modified in a way because tokenomics is adjusting. Where would you say, and Bowtied, feel free to jump in there too, or anybody else, about the progress of the testnet, ups and downs, like what you've experienced for anybody who hasn't been paying too much attention about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'd love to hear from Bowtied. I mean, Lou just saw a message from him yesterday saying he got like a version of this running up on AWS and all the different hurdles he ran into there. So there's a lot going on. I mean, this is, as people, you hear the expression all the time, it's like herding cats. It's very, very appropriate for this situation because you have more than half a dozen different chats going on all over the place, different companies that want to get involved, lots of excitement, different challenges people are having, getting their nodes set up. One of the things I wanted to clarify is that this was designed as a professional ecosystem tool set. So there's usually three different components. You've got your UI experience, which you probably run securely, which is kind of like your wallet on your own computer. Then you've got your router, and then you've got your potentially a server farm of providing a model and compute. And those different pieces don't necessarily run all together on the same machine, but that's kind of what the testnet is kind of starting as, and that's an example of some of the confusion I've noticed. All these things run on different ports, they run in different configurations. Sometimes you might even be running on different OSs potentially, these different components. So kind of thinking about that, figuring out as the documentation is changing. Ryan and his team is doing some amazing work, constantly updating things. They're working around the clock, getting things done. And so just kind of getting people up to date on the latest. I've been handing out, documentation that's still in the dev branch, for example. That's kind of how cutting edge and bleeding edge a lot of this is, but it's also making tremendous progress. In just a couple of weeks that I've been involved trying to help out, I've seen so much work being done. So I'm pretty excited about where it's at as far as the excitement. I know there's a lot of people really excited about this, and some may be a little impatient, kind of going, hey, what the heck? I want to get up and running. Get me on the testnet. But I would remind them that this is being developed, in real time right now. And at the same time, that's a really good thing. The worst thing is having nobody care. And that is not the situation we're running into. There's a ton of people that care. So many people excited about this. And that I think is really good. It's just going to require all of us to come together, have some patience, recognize that, when you run into a bug, it might be something that somebody else already solved. So what I've been doing is encouraging everybody to get to that compute provider channel in Discord. And so I've been talking to people in Telegram, talking to people in Signal, talking to people all over the place, even people DMing me, friends of mine DMing me on Facebook. And I'm just kind of bringing them all to that channel, because then when somebody solves a problem there, someone else can come and search for that problem and get the solution right away from a fellow community member, which is awesome. But I'd love to hear from Bowtied, his personal experience. There's a lot of others actually working on this.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. No, Luke, you've been great with making sure all the information gets back into Discord. I haven't been as good as that, as good as you at that, so I appreciate that. Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of testing on testnet. I would say everything is really built incredibly well. I guess that's like my high level feedback there. I think most of the issues that people are going to run into on testnet are user issues, which is a great thing because it just means that the better documentation we can get, the better the guides of setup we can get, then we can get people from 0 to 1 there. I've ran the testnet on 2 different local computers. And I got it set up on AWS as well. And I'm going to start testing on Akash and some other providers. I do see that long term, there'll be a mix of people providing compute from server farms, from their own specialized computers, but also people borrowing compute to provide it to the Morpheus ecosystem. So that's really what I want to figure out, how that will work and how we can set that up effectively so that if someone wants to go in to Akash and rent, however many A or H100s and point them towards Morpheus, then great. That helps us scale. That helps us, the more GPUs that are available in the Morpheus ecosystem, the better for Morpheus. So, that's just where I'm kind of pointing a lot of my time and trying to make sure it's as easy as possible.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say, I am so thankful for you guys. So Luke, like you just jumped in and you took the bull by the horns and just have been going at it, and I can't be more thankful. I was admittedly spread way too thin, where I was getting pinged, like 24/7 on like 5 different chat channels, in 5 different platforms, and it was just it's overwhelming. And as Luke said, it's amazing the response and how excited people are. So Luke was in a room back in, I think it was May, where I attempted to demo the first testnet release, and it was brutal. Like the chat was hanging, the sessions were getting dropped. I had to like get some of the devs on the phone, and we were talking through like what was the bug that like hung everything up, and I had like a room of like 10 people, and they were all just kind of like sitting there twiddling their thumbs watching this like glitchy UI. But this all came together like in the last 6 or 7 months, which is just incredible. Like if anyone's worked on a new network or a new protocol, like that's just lightning fast. And to have this much momentum, have this much talent behind it, have this many people involved and excited, like this is just unprecedented. So I'm really excited by all this. And the other interesting note too, and I'll throw this out there because people are like, I've often heard like, well, what if there's going to be a Morpheus competitor? Like, oh, there's all these other networks that are kind of doing something similar. A lot of people don't realize this, but I actually wrote the patent for the smart contract data routing pattern several years ago, and that patent actually just came through earlier this year. So the Morpheus network in the United States anyways, and soon in Europe, is actually protected by a patent that we control. So really excited about that as well. So we're building something that's on the threshold here. Like no one's done stuff like this before, and legally speaking, no one can do anything similar to it. So we just have to keep pushing. And I'm so excited about the partnerships I see coming through. We have like almost every single major Bitcoin miner coming forward wanting to offer AI compute. We have Foundry, one of the world's largest Bitcoin mining pools, who's really digging into AI. They want to jump in. It's going to be massive, and where we came from to where we are today, and with Luke's help and everybody else's help, like this is going to be a juggernaut. I'm so excited about it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I actually want to tap in a bit about partnerships. We saw the tweet by Fala, who is building and demonstrating this. And also, I want to invite, if anybody does have a question and want to come up on stage. I know earlier a few people raised their hand. If you'd like to, feel free to raise your hand now. Yes, black flag. But you kind of touched on the partnership one, so let's see if we get into some questions. Going on, Black Flag, you're always hanging around, man. Appreciate your presence and wanted to give you some space if you had a question for anybody up on stage.
Yeah, of course. Can you guys hear me all right?
Mike's a little bit low. If you can get it a little closer, perhaps.
Okay, yeah, 1 second. Is that any better?
There you go. Yeah, sounding good to me.
Okay, awesome. I'm in somewhat of an echoey room, so I apologize. Yeah, first of all, thank you for letting me jump on. I had the ability to meet a good amount of the core team in Toronto a couple weeks ago, which was really great. So appreciate all the insights from everybody. Ryan, I have a couple questions about, the partnerships and I guess hardware as well. So my business partner and I are actually building a business that we're effectively dedicating to compute for the Morpheus network. We're building it ground up. It's mildly disheartening to hear that somebody like Condron is planning on stepping in right away. But we'll step in and compete, brick by brick. But I was just curious if like from a hardware perspective, if anyone is running anything that's unique to AI compute as opposed to just like a GPU mining rig setup that you would have used for Ethereum mining or some other proof of works mining.
That's a very great question. So the interesting feedback I've heard is the latest and greatest GPUs aren't always the best for AI compute, or I guess all types of AI compute. And actually, this tidbit of information came from a really large Bitcoin miner, where they were running a bunch of I think it was A100s, but then they had actually some older model GPUs, and they actually found the older model GPUs to be way better for a lot of the text and chat LLMs, because you don't need a lot of the really high-end compute. It's just too expensive for a basic LLM use. Great for training models, not great for inference creation. So
Are you finding? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no.
Just as a follow-up, are you finding that people are using like higher end CPUs as well with more cores than maybe they would have for something like proof of work mining, because the inference is just taking more use of PCIe lanes and things like this?
I am admittedly not an expert in that area as far as the CPU usage. I don't know if anyone else. Short answer, I don't know on that one.
Okay. Yeah, and I know to some degree, like there's going to be trial and error in testing and figuring out what the most, optimal setup is. But yeah, I appreciate the insight very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Black Flag, for coming up. Did anybody else have anything to add on that or to ask? Or you could also feel free to type it in your chat. Type it in the chat. In the meantime, GV asked if we go back to compute coming live. Currently, the emissions for computing are stored, accumulated in a contract. When compute launches, will it have more incentives as planned? Accumulated emissions plus normal incentives. So maybe you could just speak about the emissions, the incentives, like getting people on board. What is it like kind of day one for once it does go live for these different providers to come in and operate?
Yeah, so this was actually a really difficult one to replicate in code, just because the accounting is pretty hairy. So Eric Voorhees wrote a paper back in January called the Yellowstone Compute Model, where it essentially lays out a pattern for offering a subsidized compute. So this idea that you don't have to spend your more token in order to get access to compute. And this was kind of like mind blowing. You're like, oh, wait, every other service out there is you buy token, you spend token. Here it's you buy token and you hold token. And by holding the token, you get a daily subsidy from the compute tranche. The accounting of that and how that gets implemented in code has to be, well, obviously smart contracts, it has to be deterministic, which makes it very, very hairy to calculate on a second by second basis. All that to be said, starting on February 8th, 3,456 more started to accumulate into the compute contract. Every single day, every 24 hours, it decrements just slightly. You can see that the current tranche of Morpheus token that's in that compute bucket, if you go to morelord.com, you'll see it right there in the compute box. So that large tranche of Morpheus token, 1% of that bucket every day is up for grabs by the compute providers, okay? Now, what does that mean? What does that mean, up for grabs? Well, a compute provider actually has to earn it. They don't just get a ratio of it or a portion of it just for existing. A user actually has to open up a session to the compute provider, and second by second that session is open, then the provider is going to earn Morpheus token based on their bid in the marketplace. So for ease of numbers, if I say I'm offering the latest Llama 3 model, and I say that it's going to cost you 1/100th of a more every second that you're connected to me. Obviously, that's very expensive, but just for sake of numbers, we'll say it's 0.01 more for every second that you're connected to my machine that's providing this model. Now, a user, based on how much more they hold in their wallet, will have access to in ratio that 1% subsidy every day. Now, if you're losing track already, like we're just getting started, and this is how complicated this formula is, right? But we'll just say, once again, for ease of numbers and the edification of the audience, we have 1 million more in the compute bucket. That means 1% or 10,000 more is available for grabs in this 24-hour period. And if I am charging 0.01 more per second, I could potentially earn, if I'm the only provider and I have enough users that connect to my node and leave it open all day long, 10,000 as a compute provider from that drop. Now, that scenario is pretty extreme, because in order for me to claim it and in order for people to use all 10,000 more, that means every single person that has Morpheus token would have to stake their Morpheus token and use their allotment for the day in order to spend it, which the reality of that happening is pretty much none. So most likely it's going to be a smaller fraction of that is actually earnable. And this is where projects like Venice come into play, because Venice is going to, obviously they already have, upwards of 70,000 users, maybe more now, in their platform. And as those users want access to the pro account and want access to more compute, they're going to either be staking their more or be paying Venice for Venice to stake their more, to open up sessions, and then to use compute from providers. And so it's platforms like Venice that will really drive the ecosystem for providers to be able to claim more and more of that stipend every day. Now, that was sadly to say, like, as complicated as that was actually the high level explanation. And I even left some parts out. So if you want more detail, if you want some bedtime reading material, you can go read the Yellowstone paper that's in the Morpheus doc. You can read the Lumerin Morpheus node document. I think it's sitting at like 26 pages, 27 pages. So a brief bedtime read. But that will walk you through all the mechanics and the economics of how the actual compute tranche works and gets deployed. Long story short, you buy more token, you stake more token to use it, against the network, and then you can unstake the more token or get your more token back when you're done with your session. So you never actually have to spend your more token to get compute, but providers are actually rewarded from the daily drop from the network.
Yeah, I kind of hinted at this earlier too. I wanted to also highlight that there are still, even as Yellowstone got improved by the work Lumerin did, and there are still conversations happening on the tokenomics side of things related to this. Because, for example, let's say you are running a business and like Venice went from 16,000 to 60,000 users pretty much overnight because some influencer promoted them. You know, obviously they need to ramp up their compute pretty fast, right? This is the type of thing that's going to happen within our ecosystem. And in most other networks, there's some mechanism where you can kind of pay to jump to the front of the line. Where you're like, look, I don't care. I know I don't have to pay, and I can get, you know, part of the normal allocation, but I'm willing to pay because I need to make sure that this transaction goes through or that this throughput is available. We see this in Ethereum, we see this in Bitcoin, we see this in a lot of decentralized, incentivized networks. So again, I just want to put that out there. Like I've had multiple multi-hour conversations with some people that are doing some of these kind of like what if scenarios. And so I don't envision anything massively changing, but I am, the question was specifically, you know, are there going to be other incentives for compute providers? And I just wanted to put it out there that conversations are happening along those lines, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned from successful networks that have already been out there, and more importantly, networks that have failed. And I've been a part of a number of different networks that had similar models where you just stake your token and you get access to the resources on the network. And I've seen those models, whether it was Steem and Hive or whether it was EOS or others, I've seen those models have some challenges. So I think those are being learned from by the participants that are designing some of this. And it's really, really exciting. Some of the stuff that is being thrown around as ideas, I'm very excited about. So it'll just be a matter of time before that kind of gets fleshed out and figured out. And obviously, you know, even as the network becomes more and more decentralized, there's going to be more mechanisms for getting consensus related to who is actually participating in these different buckets and these nodes, you know, using their staked weight of their, you know, rewards and all that. So there's some exciting stuff coming down the pipe. Can't wait to talk about.
Thank you for the question, GV. Again, two good questions. Ryan actually wanted to, you know, unless anybody else has some questions or wants to share, maybe this is the last bit. It kind of is something that Luke brought up before, that there is kind of a business to business aspect of the compute where there will need to be some specialization in the hardware over time, maybe not in the very beginning, some business model that arises around it as opposed to just a laptop running. And then there is the kind of user interface business with like Venice. And I guess the thing to like, you know, do you have a perspective on this? Like if we go to ChatGPT right now, I type some stuff in, I didn't pay anything. We know they're also like benefiting from our data. So they're like mining us. If they say if it's free, then you're the product. So how does that work in a model where would someone want to go and pay $5, $1, $2, let's say, to use some chatbot when the centralized version is quite free? But that's not exactly what the case is with Morpheus. But yeah, what is this relationship between kind of the front end business like Venice, where users are coming, you have a certain capacity, it's like freemium, like you have a certain amount of stuff you can do for free, and then if you want some more, you want some more features, then you buy a subscription. In relationship to the compute exchange that may be business to business oriented. What are your views on that as we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, so Venice has often been referred to, actually, I can't even say often. I think the first time I heard it was the other day. I was like, oh, that's genius. I'm going to steal that. I think Jeff said it on one of the calls, that Venice is essentially like the proton mail of the AI world, right? Now, anyone that's used Gmail versus Proton Mail, they know Proton Mail is expensive compared to Gmail. But the difference is Proton Mail is not making money off of you elsewhere. And that's going to be the same with Venice, is Venice isn't making money off of you like OpenAI is. So how can Venice provide a competitive service? Well, they have to charge for it, or they have to get their compute for free, right? And that's a difficult model. So the Yellowstone model at its base is providing network incentives so that we can compete on a decentralized permissionless system with these centralized services that essentially, you know, cannibalize the data of their users. So that was like one of hardest puzzles to solve with the economics here. Now, how are providers and this business and relationship between compute providers and builders, how is this whole economy going to mature? And I really think it's going to be around this subsidy system where, if I build an app for content or image generation that's going to automatically post it on an Instagram channel with a current subject matter, right? I'm just pulling this out of thin air, by the way, and say I want to create an Instagram page that is tropical photos of boats or whatever, and then I'm going to build an app that's going to essentially generate tropical photos of boats every couple hours, high res video every couple hours, and post it to my Instagram channel. Awesome. Now I'm a content creator. Well, that's going to cost me money. If I go through Chat GPT, if I go through Gemini, if I go through any of these other centralized systems, not only are they going to be, taking my data and using it, I am the product, but they're also charging me for that API access. That's going to end up costing me money. Versus if I could get similar performance or better performance through a decentralized system that's not using my data, and I can get it essentially for free by holding the Morpheus token, then economically it's going to be way more sustainable for me. So I really think that's going to be the crux of the business relationship, is as more and more of these AI startups realize that, hey, I could be paying a significant amount of my revenue to OpenAI or Google, or I can simply hold Morpheus token, be a part of the ecosystem, and let providers be compensated by the network. I think the economics are going to be in our favor. Now it's just a matter of sales and marketing.
Thank you for Ryan. Thank you for that, Ryan. That's a great example because it comes down to a philosophy as opposed to just a pure economic exchange. Like, what is cheaper? We know we shouldn't just buy junk food because it's cheaper, because it's actually not helpful to our health and our ecosystem. So when we kind of can adopt that view of private things, decentralized things, and Proton has done a great job of kind of leading that front, saying these are the values we have. These are the values we think are worth bringing back in society, not to be the product of something and still pay for it. Then there could be kind of an education element that comes in. And I think that is definitely what's interesting about the Morpheus community, is people are willing to do that kind of education and understanding of dialing back, what are our kind of our principles. So thank you for that. Thank you also Bowtied and Luke Stokes for coming up. We're going to wrap up the call now. If anybody's listening and you have a question or you feel like something wasn't resolved, definitely drop it in general chat. Feel free to tag anybody here. I'm gonna post this in just a little bit, so we'll have that out soon. But thank you all for coming up. If there's any final statements or anything you guys want to say before we head out, feel free to.
Yeah, I just was going to leave a comment. Join the compute provider channel. If you hear people talking about wanting to be involved, there's a lot of activity there, and we'd love to have you there.
Yep,
Yes,
I was going to say the same thing. Go test, look at the test net, try and find bugs and problems, because that's what fuels the improvements. So test and join the channel.
Good reminder. And anybody who doesn't have that role, you can go to the roles channel at the top under welcome, get roles, and you can press a little emoji and you'll have that compute provider role. So you can hear the pings, you can see what's going on in the combo. All right, everybody, thank you very much for coming out. We're looking to have something another 2 weeks, so stick around, pay attention, and enjoy the rest of your evening, morning, or night, wherever you're at in the world.